Well, hello, Village Heights family and guests. Thank you for being here today. This is kind of a cool, if it's the first time or if you've been before and you're here because of family, thank you for being here. Because today we're actually closing out a collection. It's on one of my favorite topics, and that's leadership. I love talking about leadership because it is crucial, vital to our development as humans. And you're like, is it really? Okay, think about in your past of like when you had a hard time, when you were at a low point in your life, there's that one person you can always think about that they took the lead for you. When you didn't know how to go further, they stood up for you and took the lead. And now you have developed into something better. They gave you an opportunity to grow and keep going. So this season that we've been going through, the past 2 years, has been challenging. I don't think anybody would argue with that. It's been brutal for some, financially, socially, and relationally. And honestly, we're all picking up the pieces and moving forward the best that we can. We're saying things like new normal. That basically means we're trying, okay? New normal means we're trying, guys. We're trying to do this, trying to keep going. And honestly, some of us, we're not just responsible for ourselves going forward. We're responsible for the people around us. We're responsible for helping them move forward because they're looking to you for direction, inspiration, and ultimately hope. Hope that there is a light at the end of the tunnel because sometimes they can't see it. And so they need someone to take the lead and show them the path and remind them that it's there even when they don't know it. And so under normal circumstances, leading is tough enough. And of course, the past 2 years is not for the squeamish, no matter where you fall in it. And we were not prepared. I wasn't. You might have been. I think the only one that was HEB. I think they were the only ones that were prepared for this, which I don't know, they can tell the future somehow. But how could you be prepared? I didn't have a course in college that was like, just in case another pandemic hits, this is what I didn't have that. It would have been great if we did. So this is my first time, and all of us have unique responsibilities, and I'm sure in your responsibilities, it's your first time to go through something like this. And so perhaps you can relate because there's no instruction manual. There is no map in how to navigate this. And we're making this honestly up as we go along, at least I am. You know, you might not want to admit it, probably more than we would like to admit. And the tension of every leader feels this. Every provider who's lost their job. Every parent who finds themselves parenting alone. Every small business owner who's trying to keep the business afloat, not just for themselves, but for their employees. They have felt this. And we don't have all the answers, and we don't always know what to do. That's what turbulent times feel like. That's what it feels like when the waves are crashing around you. If you've ever gone to the beach and try to go out into the water, like those waves look fun. And you start heading out there and it's to your knees. And then it's to your waist. Be like, I want to go to the big waves. Those look fun. And then it gets to your chest. And then it gets to your neck. And you're like, I don't know if I'm having fun anymore, right? But you're still keeping a smile on your face because you don't want to scare the kids. And then all of a sudden, it starts crashing in around you, the waves. And a fun moment turns into a scary moment because all your senses are taken away from you. And you're not even certain you're going to make it out of that. It messes with you. Finding ourselves in swirling uncertainty, it's a permanent part of life. Whether you're in it now, or you're going to be, or you just got out of it, somebody around you is probably in it. It's permanent. It's going to be a part. And uncertainty is why the world needs leaders. It's why your family needs you, your company. It's why your city, your neighbors need you. Because sometimes someone's got to take the lead. So this collection, we are focusing on the important facets of leadership for leading in times like these. These facets, these aspects are always important, but right now they're more important than ever. And it's essential for every leadership tool belt. So in week one, just to recap real quick, week one, we acknowledged the leadership truth that leadership is a stewardship. It's temporary, and we're all accountable for the leadership that we have. Week 2, we talked about moral authority. That's credibility beyond context. That means having authority and people leading people beyond the position that you have. And we earn that by walking our talk. In week 3, we talked about clarity. Certainty is what people thirst for, but certainty lives in the realm we have no control over. That's the future. So we shouldn't offer things that we can't provide. So in times of turbulence, clarity is the next best thing to certainty. So be clear even when you are uncertain. And that brings us to the third vital attribute of leading through turbulent times, and what we're facing right now, leading through uncertainty, and that is to display humanity. To display your humanity. The best thing to be when leading humans is human. And that sounds kind of funny and ironic, but it's true. What does that look like? It looks like vulnerability. It looks like transparency, and honestly, it looks like just being real. Sometimes as leaders, we feel like when somebody's going through something difficult and they need to be led, I have to act like a superhuman for some reason. Like I'm above these things and I don't struggle with this stuff. And that's why you get this chasm disconnect from a CEO or a person that is at the bottom of the totem pole, because they're like, do you even feel the way I feel? Could you even feel the way I feel? So having humanity and showcasing it is exercising your empathy muscle. Yes, that is a muscle that you have to exercise, because that's not a strong muscle when we are born. And you're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, have you met a toddler? They're so mean and selfish. Okay, they are. They're really sweet and cute. And that's how they survive. But they are innately selfish, right? So we have to be taught to be empathetic, to be kind to one another. The people looking to you need you to flex that empathy muscle and show your humanity. They need to be convinced that you know how they feel, because they will be far more open to your influence if you are, especially if you're leading people into the unknown. So acknowledging and legitimizing fear, worrying concerns, people are more likely to trust you. When you don't hide away from it, act like it doesn't exist or it doesn't affect you, people will trust you more. However, if you ignore it, downplay it, brush it off, criticize someone for having a hard time, they're likely to resist you. That resistance is happening because they feel like you don't understand me. So for someone to follow you, you've got to convince them you get them, right? There's a principle to leadership that I like to practice, and I actually, before we started Village Heights, it's kind of when I learned about it and put it into motion, is that you have to care about what people care about before they'll care about what you care about. Before they will even care why you're there, you got to show them, I care about you first. So when we started Village Heights, we didn't immediately go, all right, guys, we're here. You need another church, right, in Houston? Well, here's a sign. It's a different logo, and we might be a different way. We play our music different. Here, you ready? That would not have been received very well. And so what we did for a year before we even announced it or planted anything or started anything, Hannah and I just came to the community, and we just got involved. And whoever would let us get involved. And we chaired events, and we did things, and we told them, we care about what you care about, and we're going to get involved. And we didn't have to go, but ask about us, because naturally they go, well, where are you from? Well, what are you? You've cared about me. Now I want to hear about you. So to be clear, express your humanity in your role as a leader. This isn't empathy for empathy's sake. This isn't, I know you're worried. I'm worried too, so let's be worried together. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a version of empathy, but that's not leadership. That's not what people are looking for. So empathy on a leadership context is for building trust. It's so that the people who depend on you will trust you enough to follow you. And there's a biblical term for this, and this term might make some of you nervous, but it shouldn't, and the term is pastor. Pastor. So for most of us, the term pastor carries some religious connotation, but technically it shouldn't. When it comes to what the word in Latin means, it means shepherd. right? And so pastor should never have been included, honestly, in the English New Testament because it's not a translation of Greek text. And so the early Bible translators substitute the Latin term pastor for the Greek term shepherd. Why? That's a story for another day. We're not going to get into that. But 2,000 years ago, pastoring and shepherding was not a position or title. It was something you did. It was an action. It was something that you carried out, right? So in turbulent times, people need a pastor or a shepherd, not because they're sheep. You're thinking, oh yeah, they're all dumb animals. They need help. That's not what I'm saying. Not because they're sheep, because they're looking to you from what a sheep wants from a shepherd. They want protection, they want security, and they want reassurance. And if you lead in any capacity, shepherding is a part of your responsibility. And I know what you're thinking, Bill, easy for you to say. You're a professional pastor, right? You have the title behind your name. You're a professional shepherd. Not really. I might have pastor in my title, but it doesn't come natural to me. It really doesn't. It's something that I've had to work on over time. I've had to learn. I'm still learning. And I say this not to go question me, but to go, I'm worried about Bill. No, it's to give you confidence that you don't have to be perfect at it to try it. And you think, I could never, I'm not touchy-feely enough. Sometimes I'm also described as a robot. I get it. You're not wired that way, but it's still your responsibility at home, at work, in your community, at school. And it might not come natural. That doesn't mean that you don't care about people. You ever had to justify yourself? When empathy wasn't natural for you, shepherding, pastoring wasn't natural for you, and then you had to convince them, no, I do care, I promise, because I didn't do the things that I was supposed to do, or you thought I was supposed to do. You do care, you just care differently. But in times of disruption, turbulence, uncertainty, you have to disrupt your pattern. There's times that you have to take what you are naturally inclined to do and put that aside to shepherd, to pastor, to help people. So in times of uncertainty, we have to put on our pastor shepherd hat because along with clarity and moral authority, it's what people need. And it might not be the most important thing they need, but it's what they need first. Before they'll hear anything else, they need to know that you care about them and that you're there for them beyond your own context. So don't hide behind what's comfortable. Don't barricade yourself in busyness, a title, or a role. Great leaders do what needs to be done. Because there's a lot of times you wake up in the morning, what you have to do to continue to be the leader that people need you to be, it doesn't add up in your schedule. That wasn't on the calendar. I have to do that. That's the way it goes. In times of disruption, people need shepherding, pastoring, and they ultimately want reassurance. Because think about it. If a shepherd is away from the flock and a wolf comes, the sheep get nervous. Who do they go to? Who are they excited to see when the wolf is around? The shepherd. Because the shepherd has a staff, and they know that shepherd, because time has proven, he cares about them, and he's going to protect them. So here's a promise. Even if you don't do it well, people will appreciate it. They will appreciate you stepping out of your comfort zone for them. So that's good news for you. You could be terrible at it like I have been in the past in my life, but people will still appreciate it because you're there. And so according to Jesus, that's what great leaders do. That's what he did. And he put others first. And when he's on his journey, he's doing his ministry on a particular part of an exhausting part of his journey while he's been walking in his Jesus sandals. They were just sandals then because he was Jesus and he started the whole Jesus sandal thing. And so he had hands-on ministry and it was tough. He wasn't jumping in and out of Ubers. He wasn't flying in. He didn't have microphones or anything. He was in the trenches, doing it in the most difficult way that we could think. And so there's this special moment in Scripture where Jesus and the 12 apostles went out of the town for a break. Like, we need a break, guys. We've been going nonstop. Jesus needs to rest. And so they take this opportunity. So Peter, by way of Mark, recounts what took place when they separated to go take a break. And this is what it says. Mark 6:32, begin there. It says, "So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw the large crowd, Jesus said, 'Ew, people, feelings, hard pass.' He got back in the boat and he raced to the other side of the lake. No, that's not what happened, okay? That's what we would do. You ever been in that situation? Heading to the family function. Ooh, people, ugh. Going to work, knowing you have some bad news to deliver. Ooh, people, hard pass, right? That's not what he said. This is what he did. In Mark 6:34, he said, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. This is so powerful. Instead of running away, even though he was justified, he was exhausted, he was tired, he was justified to walk away. Nobody would have blamed him for it. But instead, he leaned in and moved their direction. In fact, he spent so much time with everybody that they all missed dinner. And this is the famous story that we hear about where he fed the 5,000. That was meaning 5,000 men, which meant 5,000 families. So it was probably closer to 20 to 25,000 people. And that's what a good shepherd does. When the people following are thirsty and hungry, he feeds them. Right? And that's in a literal sense, but it's also in a philosophical sense. So he fed them, all that. And later, John would record Jesus' description of his role as a shepherd, and it's super instructive and inspiring. And for those of us responsible for members of our family, company, or community, here's the posture that we needed to take, that we need to. Speaking of the role of shepherd, Jesus says this in John 10:3. It says, he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. That's key. They know his voice. This is so important, especially during times of uncertainty and disruption. Your voice is actually more important than the words that you're saying. There's times when people are going through a rough time and you're there for them and you're present for them. You will say something, they'll never remember it. They won't. Because just the fact that your voice is there is comforting. Because your voice is an expression of your humanity. People need to hear your voice. It's not enough for them to read your words. Email and text is when things are fine, okay? That's when you email and text. You find ways to people to hear your voice when it's not fine. Nobody answers a call anymore, right? Especially me. I got to be honest with you. If you get my number and you call me and you're not my caller ID, I'm not answering, okay? It's going to go to voicemail because I always say if it's important, they'll leave a voicemail. Because if it's important, they will hear your voice. And I have to be completely transparent with you right now. I'm going to admit a fault of mine. A couple of months ago, I was a wedding that I performed. They don't go to this church. I was connected to them through the venue. And I always try to connect with people getting married. I'm encouraging them because marriage is fun, but it's hard, right? But if you're in it for the right reasons and you go the right distance, it's going to be very rewarding, right? And so I was with them. I counseled as best as I could. I did the wedding. I performed. It was beautiful. Everybody thanked me. There was tears, all that kind of thing. Tears and laughter. That's all what I'm after at weddings. And what happens, and if you've been married, you know this, you hand the marriage certificate to the pastor, and then the pastor takes it home and signs it and does all the things that they got to do. Sometimes there's ceremonial stuff that you do, and that's great, but that's normally what happens. And so then I get it. I sign it, do all the things, and I put it in the mail and send it back to the tax assessor. So I did that. I signed it. I put it in the envelope, and my desk is, I don't want to admit it's pretty messy, but it is. And so I put it down. At some point, it either got covered up and fell off the desk or something like that. And a lot of you are getting nervous right now. It's like, should I have Bill do my wedding or not? Yes, you should. Yes, you should, because I've learned my lesson. So it fell down. Months go by, months. And then I get a text and then a phone call that went to voicemail from the bride, and she's frantic, and she's upset, and she's like, did you send off the marriage certificate? Because I got to change my name, and I'm sure there was like insurance reasons and other stuff, and it's very important they do that. And it was all I had to do was put it in the mail. And she's like, do you have it? Did you send it? And I'm thinking, I don't see it. Surely I would have. I've always do it. And they're like, well, I called the text. They're calling them. And they're like, they don't have it. I'm like, oh, no. And so I start searching, and I find it. I find the envelope. Now, I know what you're thinking, and my logical mind went there because I can be a robot before I have empathy, okay? And my first thought was, and I'm being completely honest, and don't shame me because I know you would have thought the same thing, I could throw this away. I could shred this. They wouldn't know. And I'm just like, I mailed it. USPS, I mean, whatever, what are you going to do, right? But I chose to do something different. Because I still wanted the opportunity to lead them. Because I had a moment with them, and I told them, if you need me, call me. If you need advice, you need a gripe, whatever it is, I'm here for you. I want to see your marriage survive. Right? And so I couldn't let that moment of me trying to save myself, get out of trouble, negate and ruin that opportunity. So what I did, I knew I couldn't send a text. I knew I couldn't send an email. I called. And I called again, and I called again. No answer. So I finally left a voicemail, and I ate the biggest portion of crow that could have been offered. I was just honest. I said, look, I'm so sorry. I understand this is probably difficult, and it's my fault. I messed up, and you're right to be mad at me. And this is all in a voicemail. She probably still has it. I don't know. Listens on a repeat. Who knows? I said, I'm so sorry. I should have done better. I should have made sure. So I put it in the mail. It's on the way there right now. It should be there soon. But if something happens, just let me know. I was willing to the point where I was going to go repay for the thing because I felt so guilty. And I don't know. I never got a call back. I don't know what happened, but I'm hoping that she heard my voice and I was able to recover the leadership that I had. They need to hear your voice. They need to hear your humanity. Your voice is your expression of who you are. And so convey your humanity, empathy, and genuine interest. Call somebody even if you can't call everybody. And that's really important. Call somebody even if you can't call everybody. Do for one that you wish that you could do for everyone, right? This is key because you can always possibly disqualify the reason you should help or you should be involved because sometimes it's not fair. I'm kidding. It's all the time. It's not fair. It's always going to be uneven. Life is not fair. It's never going to be. So some checked on is always better than no one checked on, right? So ignore that voice in your head that says, since I can't do it for everyone, I shouldn't do it for anyone. That's me. That's what goes through my head, my thoughts, because that's nonsense. Don't try to be fair. Be engaged. Create opportunity to engage with people. And I know what you're thinking. It's not natural for me. And it's not because I don't care. For me personally, it's not natural. And it's not because I don't care. I devalue how important the value is of my presence that might be for someone. I do that to myself. And this is something that Hannah's good at, and I hate even admitting that this happens, but sometimes people will reach out, right? I don't know if something happens unless you say something has happened, right? And so they'll reach out, they'll say something happened, and then we'll go, okay, we're praying with you, that kind of. But I'm kind of person that's like, I said what I could say, and I don't know what else to say. And Hannah's like, it's been a while. We need to follow back up. You should call them. I'm like, but what am I going to say? I've already said it, right? She's like, it doesn't matter. Call them anyways. And I'm like, oh. And I do it. And it was the right choice. Because it didn't really matter what I said. Just the fact that I called. The fact that they heard my voice. Even if I just repeated the same thing I said again. They know that I care about them enough to call. To let my voice be heard. So now Hannah's going to use that against me. I know it. I know she's like, you said it on stage. You got to do it now. It's okay. I'm willing to take that on. Do for one that you wish that you could do for everybody. Because again, it's our responsibilities as a leader to do that. Call somebody even though you can't call everybody. So if you are a Jesus follower, it goes beyond good leadership etiquette. Beyond that. Because this is what Jesus said in John 10:11. It says, I am the good shepherd. And if Jesus, we'll stop right there. If Jesus is willing to step out of his role as I am all supreme God, he didn't have to come to earth. He didn't have to do that. He chose to do that. And he came down and set himself aside for us. We have no choice to lead the same way that he did. We have no choice. And so if you're a follower, we want to be like him. And what he says next, because you'd be like, okay, I'll be a shepherd, but what he says next might make your heart skip a beat. It says, the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Now, I know, probably not in the exact same context of what Jesus did. He literally gave up his life. Now we're speaking kind of a metaphorical, philosophical thing. There's a way to give up your life without taking your life. And that's what he's asking of us. Be the shepherd that lays down their life. The good shepherd puts the sheep first, and the sheep know it. The good shepherd steps out of his or her comfort zone to make sure the sheep feel comforted. What does that mean? That means don't just be a father, be a dad. Don't just be a mother, be a mom. Be you, be human. Don't just be a boss, a manager, or a supervisor. Be a human that has a position, that fulfills something. It's put this way, and in Jesus' words, it says, don't lead like a hired hand, someone who's there because they have to be or because they're paid to be. The hired hand isn't in it for the sheep. The hired hand is and should, this is what Jesus, let me put it what Jesus said. He says it best. It says, the hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Why? Because the man runs away, he is the hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. To him, the sheep are a paycheck. To him, it's just a means to an end. And that's why you see these moments where your company goes through something bad. Where did the leader go? We don't know, because he doesn't know what to say, and it was just a paycheck to them anyways, right? During times of uncertainty and disruption, when the wolves are howling, your presence and willingness to stick around and to keep showing up is more important than ever. When your family is going through something rough, when your neighbors are going through something rough, you don't have to have the answers. You just need to be there. Be there. Your presence is more important than your presentation. And I struggle with feeling like I shouldn't show up until I have something to offer, right? I struggle with that. I struggle with, if I don't have a solution, if I don't have something that's going to make it better, I don't want to show up because I want to offer something, right? And so I will naturally back off. It's difficult on some of us because we're solution and progress oriented. But that's a mistake. That's a mistake. In uncertain times, our presence is everything. So why pull people together if we don't have solutions or answers? Because in times of disruption, there's something more important. That's our presence. And have you ever sat in a doctor's waiting room and thought, man, that doctor comes around too often? You ever thought that? Man, can you just stay out of this room? You ever thought man, they're giving me too much information. You ever feel like that? No, you want them there. You're honestly, selfishly thinking, forget about the rest of them. My situation's worse. Can you stay in here, doctor? And you want to lock the door and keep thinking, I need solutions. I need reassurance that I'm going to be okay. That's what we do. A doctor can't be present too much or too frequently. When the doctor walks in, what do? We lean in. What do you got to say, doc? Can you help me? We crave reassurance, so we crave their presence. We don't want a text or a phone call. We want a person. We use something called MD Live where it's from home, and I never use the phone call feature. I'm always like, I want the video feature. I want to look them in the eyes, right? I want to tell me, give it to me straight, doc. Am I going to make it through this, right? That's what I want. So, be there. Be present. When you're in the hospital room, you don't care about the quality of the doctor's presentation. We don't roll our eyes when their grammar is not the best or English is not their first language. As a leader, you're responsible for asking yourself every day, do people know I care? You're responsible for that. Do the people you're responsible for know that you care? And if you know that you care, do they? Are you doing things to show that? Is your humanity showing? Ask yourself that every day. And so to wrap all this up, I want to talk about two leaders, okay? And now this might be offensive and for some of you, and I'm sorry about that, but I want to talk about President Obama and President Bush. See, I'm doing both sides, okay, so calm down. So regardless of which party you take too seriously, you should love both of these stories, okay? Not because you love them, they love that person, but because you're mature enough to learn from anybody and everybody, right? Everybody say, right? There it is. Okay, good. So for a few minutes, I want you to set aside your political filter, okay? And these events are going to show the importance of taking the mantle of shepherd and pastor in times of disruption, uncertainty, and in the instance of unspeakable tragedy. So the first one, if you've known a family who's ever lost a young child, right, it's devastating. Right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When a child passes away, there's nothing that you can say to make them feel better. There's nothing that you can do to make them feel better. It's just a fact of life. No words, no solution. So imagine that situation that you're having to comfort a family. Now imagine that you had to do it 20 times for 20 different families in the same day. Imagine that. So President Obama, in 2012 is when you probably know it as the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, right? On December 14th, a 20-year-old broke into a school, and he shot and killed 46 people. Half of them were children. To this day, and Michelle Obama is recorded as saying this, that was probably the darkest day in the White House that they experienced while in office. She says that she walked into the Oval Office, and it was just him and her, and just silence. They didn't even know what to say. And it just kind of washed over them, the tragedy and devastation of it all. And so President Obama was known as a fact guy, and he wanted the details. No matter how gruesome, no matter how sad they might be, I want the details. Give them all to me, because that's how he operated. And so on the morning so the next thing that they did, and so Joshua Tobias, he was the spiritual advisor to the president, and in his book, the President's Devotional, he gave witness to what happened next. So they heard this news, and there was comforting that needed to happen, right? Something had to happen. They had to hear from the president, okay? And so he records what happens next. And so they decided that they were going to go to the school. The president was going to go to the school, and he was going to address these families. Now, there could have been a way that he could have addressed it that was more comfortable, that probably easier. He could have got in and got out of there, but this is what he did instead. And this is their words. This is out of the book. It says, "We prepared 7 or 8 classrooms for the families of the slain children and teachers. 2 or 3 families to a classroom." So they have it set up. The families are there. And so he's talking about, I'm watching the president. He's right next to him. And this is what he says. "The president took a deep breath and steeled himself and went into the first classroom. And what happens next, I will never forget. Person after person received an engulfing hug from their commander-in-chief. He said, 'Tell me about your son. Tell me about your daughter.' And then hold pictures of the lost beloved as their parents describe their favorite foods, television shows, and the sound of their laughter. For the younger siblings of those who had passed away, many of them 2 to 3 or 4 years old, too young to understand, the president would grab them, toss them up, laughing up into the air, and then hand them a box of White House M&Ms. In each room, I saw his eyes water, but he did not break. And the entire scene would repeat for hours. Over and over and over again, the well over 100 relatives of the fallen, each one equally broken and wrecked by loss. He didn't have to do that. But he knew they needed something more. Something more. The next story, okay? The next story, you probably know because it was very public, and we just celebrated, or not celebrated, we honored the 20th year. We celebrated the heroes is what we celebrated, but we recognize it's been 20 years since this happened. So December 11th, 2001, terrorists flew our own planes into the Twin Towers, killing thousands, tearing families apart in a blink of an eye. Devastation, right? And it's on video, and you can see it, and it's all sorts of documentaries, that when President Bush received the news, he was at an elementary school, and they were about to be in front of a bunch of kids in a classroom, and they heard that a plane hit a building in New York, and they're like, oh, how sad, it must have been a prop plane, they must have fallen asleep, had a heart attack, something, oh, how devastating, right? And then he walks out, and he's with his teacher, and he's in front of all these children. And then his advisor walks up to his ear and says, we've been attacked. Another plane has hit the other building. And you can see it. He doesn't really flinch. I mean, he kind of moves a little bit, but you can see the anger, the emotion go over him like a wave. But he stayed presidential because he didn't want to scare the kids. He didn't want to do something crazy in that moment. And so he put a smile on and got through that time with those children. And it says that when they left, he's practically running to Air Force One, not because he's scared, because something needs to be done. He wants answers. And he's so emotionally driven and affected by this that it says that in his advisors, he was angry with them on the plane because they were saying, we can't go to the White House, we can't land. And he's like, no, I want to go there. Why are you holding me back from this? Because they were trying to protect him. He was mad at them for trying to protect him, right? And so a lot of things happened, and he was very presidential, and he did televised things and all that. But one of the most memorable responses he had happened 3 days later. Okay, so news came about that the president was about to come to ground zero, and there was a podium set up, and it was a whole thing. It was an organized thing. And so this got around to all the first responders who had been working tirelessly, grief-stricken, having to pull people, their friends, out of this rubble and pull things off, right? And so the president's coming. This is like a breath of fresh air. We're getting excited about it. And so they're kind of all gathering around and looking for spots to get the best position. They kind of know across the street, that's where the podium is, that's where it's all set up, right? So there was this one man named Bob Beckwith, and at the time, he was a 69-year-old former New York firefighter. He had been retired for 7 years, but he was so affected and drawn that he needed to do something. His family tried to convince him. He's like, you're 69 years old, you're retired, you can't do this. And he's like, no, I have to. And so he's there, and he's doing the work, and he's pulling rubble off, right? And so he's trying to find his spot, and he knew where the podium and the cameras were, and there was a fire truck, that he had, early that day, him and his colleagues had taken rubble off of it and unearthed, and he realized, wow, that would be a great spot. And so he climbs up on top of the fire truck, and he's like, man, I got my spot, I'm ready, okay? So as he's waiting, a Secret Service agent comes up to him and looks at him and says, hey, is that safe to stand up there? And he's like, of course, it's a fire truck. We just did it. Yeah, it's safe. We've checked it. And believe it or not, the Secret Service agent say, hey, can you jump up and down to show me? And so he jumps up and down and says, yes, it's safe. It's fine. And the agent goes, okay, somebody's going to come, and I need you to help them up and help them down. And so Bob's like, man, my spot's been robbed, right? He's like, I have a good spot, and now they're going to give it to some Secret Service agent or photographer because it's a killer spot. He knew it. He hunted it out, right? He's like, man, I'm going to lose my spot now, okay? And so, the commotion kind of lets down, and then it brings back up again because the president's coming, right? You got motorcade coming, you got Secret Service agents crawling over the place, and he sees the president walking towards the podium. All of a sudden, the president takes a hard right and starts heading straight towards Bob. The Secret Service is leading him there. And before he knows it, the president is putting his hand up for Bob to help him up. Bob helps the president. And Bob's like, I can't believe this. This is wild. And then he starts, as soon as he gets President Bush up there, he starts to try to get down. And President Bush says, where are you going? And he goes, well, they told me I got to get down. And he's like, no, you're not. You're going to stay right with me. And he throws his arm around this firefighter as if they had been old friends. Close. Held him close. And so, I can get through this. The next thing, again, is the president's there. He pulls him up, all that. And so, President Bush could have avoided the rubble. He could have avoided all the mess. He could have just went to the podium. I'm sure he had this rehearsed speech, all this, and just did the speech and left, right? Got out of there, get back on Air Force One and get out of there, okay? But he chose to do something different. He chose to be there in the heart of it, right there in the middle of it, where they just pulled rubble off. That's where he wanted to be, so that he was truly present. And so then they gave him a megaphone, and he begins his speech, right? And so what happens next is true to his heart. What happens next? And it's a beautiful thing that can only happen in true humanity. So he starts to talk using the megaphone. And so you hear in the distance, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. You can hear it on the video if you ever watch it. It starts getting loud. We can't hear you. And Bob says, I knew in that moment he ditched everything he had planned, and he acted in the moment. He spoke from his heart, and this is what he said. He says, I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down are going to hear from all of us soon. I am sure that those words put a chill of energy up the spine of everybody in his presence. All those tired people who had been working for days and days and days to hopefully save their friends, to make sense of this all. And so they didn't know what was going on outside in the world. They probably felt alone. They were in the midst of uncertainty. They didn't even know if the ground was going to give out from under them. So they were very careful. And the president took that moment to get right into the mess with them, to take his seal, who he was, and say, I'm just human like you, and I hear you. And you don't know it, but the whole world hears you. I'm with you. Powerful, powerful stuff. So not only was he present in the mess, he said, I'm with you. And that might be the first time you've heard kind of these special details of these moments in history. And I tell them because it takes away our excuses. Because if the highest position in the land sees fit and necessary to showcase their humanity when it's needed, you don't have an excuse. You don't. These presidents were in that moment as pastor-in-chief and shepherd-in-chief, not because they claimed the title, but because they acted and led in that capacity. They showed their humanity. They took off the mantle of authority. They set it aside because that's what the moment called for. And they both could have gotten away with a handwritten letter or note. They could have gotten away with just addressing everybody, and there was a distance. And they said some things, and it was polished, and they could have done that. They had the right to. But they knew it wasn't the right thing to do. They could have expressed condolences and then flown away, but they didn't. And that's what the moment called for. There's a time for non-huggers to hug, for order givers to listen, for fact-loving people to stop and feel. I'm talking to myself on that one, to not be a robot. And for progress people to pause and just be in the moment. There's a time for a father to be a dad and a mother to be a mom. And in turbulent uncertainty, words are important, but words aren't enough. Lead with humanity, presence, compassion, empathy. Assure them that you care and do whatever it takes to make that necessary. Make sure your humanity is showing. Because if someone or some someones are looking to you for reassurance and hope, I know that you can get it right. I know you can. I'm confident in that. Because now you know. Remember, leadership is a stewardship. It's temporary, and you're accountable for it. Grow and protect your moral authority that results in influence. Be clear, even when you're not certain. That will result in confidence and demonstrate that you care. That builds trust. And do not shy away from showing your humanity, even though how much it might hurt or attack your pride or your insecurities. A human is the best thing to lead a human. So now more than ever, the world needs leaders. Now more than ever, the world needs leadership. Now more than ever, your family, your work, your neighbors need you. So do not miss your chance to take the lead. Watch what happens. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity. Lord, I thank you that you gave us the words. I'm so glad it's in writing of how you handled leadership, because it's the best way to handle leadership. And so I pray that we will take on the opportunity, take on the chances to be a leader like you. So continue to craft us. Continue to give us the courage to show our humanity when it's called for. And Lord, help our church, Village Heights, continue to grow and show its humanity so that we can show we're not better than anybody else. We're not doing something that's different from them. We're all human following after a God who loves us. And so then everything that we do, I hope it leads back to you. In everything that we lead, help us make it come back to you. I thank you, Jesus. Help us in our leadership. Bless us as we go. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.